Hey, everybody, welcome back to TCB. Today on TCB, we are talking to Cale McQuitty. Cale, what's up, man? Welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, man. Good. Glad to have you on here, man. So, before we get started, just a little intro, dude. Who are the people listening to? Who are you? What do you do? Where are you from, etc.?
My name's Cale McQuitty. I'm not necessarily a Bitcoin maximalist or a trader or economist or anything like that. I own part of a fabrication company here down in Houston. My day to day is selling steel and hanging out with customers, making deals and things like that. We have pivoted quite a bit into the data center space and things of that nature, which kind of runs in tandem with the mining space. And so, kind of just wanted to come on here and talk to you kind of a little bit about some of those things.
Yeah, man. Right on. Well, hey, man, this is for the Bitcoin newcomers, so no need to be a Bitcoin expert here, brother. So, if you could, I always like to start here. If you could remember where you first kind of came across Bitcoin, if you like have that memory of when you kind of first came across it or came to know of it, and then just kind of what's your general impression of it? What do you think about what's going on here?
Man, probably the first impression of it was from a family member kind of talking about it. They turned me on to it, got me interested in the idea. And of course you're hearing it and you're thinking get rich quick kind of stuff. And, sky's the limit and here, put all your money in there and you're going to be a millionaire next week. However, after I kind of got into it, I found this podcast. That was one thing, and kind of got some more information on what it's really about. And I think that part's really cool about it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I think, dude, that's a good way to kind of put it because it does kind of seem like, depending on where your entry point is, given Bitcoin's volatility, it could feel like you just made the greatest decision in the history of your life, or it could feel like you're the biggest idiot in the world and you just lost half of your money. So I think getting to learn a little bit more about exactly what it is, exactly what problem we're trying to solve here, I think is what builds you with the conviction to be able to kind of hold through those cycles and then hopefully eventually kind of reap the fruits of that labor of actually kind of putting the time in to understand it. Because I think of a lot of people, if you kind of try to come to Bitcoin with just kind of like a tourist mentality, it's going to shake you out. It's either going to bore you to death, it's going to scare you to death, it's going to do one of the above. So you really just have to kind of be willing to stick around and put enough time in and ride a cycle or two, and then just not be afraid of it and not just get bored to death and kind of move on to the next shiny thing, the next like SpaceX IPO or something like that.
Oh
I
yeah.
think I think that's the key, man, is just being willing to kind of stick around long enough, put a little bit of time in, and then hopefully have a little bit of an aha moment of, oh, hang on, this isn't really just some kind of get rich quick scheme. This is like everything else suddenly starts to feel like a lie. That's kind of this like orchestrated lie from the monetary system. And you're like, oh, hang on. And then how problematic is that? Is this a solution? And the farther you dig and the longer you stick around, I've kind of got to the point now where it's just I'm basically numb to the volatility because I understand what's driving it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I feel like Bitcoin's been the shiny thing like multiple times in its existence. Even 5 years ago, it was mostly retail investors, and now we're seeing ETFs and corporations and institutions and so on all get involved. I, I don't know that that's necessarily good for Bitcoin. I don't know that it's bad. I'm back to being kind of new to it. Every single week it's changing, I feel like.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, for sure. But as ever kind of player, I think I'm not sure good or bad. I think it's inevitable. I think it's one of those things where if Bitcoin is going to be money, if it's going to try to solve money for the world, then inevitably anyone that is in the money business was going to get involved on some long enough timeline. So the fact that kind of the banks are showing up, financial advisors are showing up, that really was to be expected. Depending on who you ask, it maybe happened faster or slower than they maybe expected it to happen. But I think it was kind of the inevitable arc if Bitcoin is to succeed. Like, there's really no way that Bitcoin becomes kind of a new monetary layer for the entire economy without banks and financial institutions getting involved. That just
right.
doesn't really make sense. I think we're going to see the same thing on the nation state level. It's kind of inevitably going to get to that level as well. If it is to succeed, obviously the people that, sovereigns are going to want to hold sound money as well. So I think that's probably the next shoe to drop. We've already seen a little bit of it. We have a Bitcoin reserve in the United States. whether it just be in name only. We don't see a lot of action on that
Yes.
front quite yet, but we have kind of declared one, and we have at least said we're not going to sell any of the Bitcoin that they already have confiscated from, law enforcement proceedings and such. So, but I
Yeah.
think that's inevitably going to grow as well. And I think we're going to be asking the same question. Is that good? Be good for Bitcoin, bad for Bitcoin? To be determined, but I think it's inevitable for Bitcoin if it's going to end up being a monetary, settlement layer for humanity. Then all of those actors are going to get involved.
Yeah. And you kind of just talked about Bitcoin in like three different things. You know, a lot of people see it as a currency, but then there's the technology side to it. And then it's basically digital real estate. I mean, where would you place it?
Yeah, good question, man. I mean, I think it's kind of all the above, and I think that's why people have a hard time wrapping their head around it, because it's this idea of like, hey, what is this thing? Is this thing supposed to be money? Am I supposed to spend this thing down the street? Is it supposed to be a store of value? Is it supposed to be like gold? Is this a network like Facebook or Verizon? And it's really all the above. So it's kind of hard to wrap your head around it. And as it's evolving, it's really kind of working its way through all of those phases, which I would say, at least on the monetary front, you kind of have to be a store of value first, and then you kind of evolve into like a mean of exchange phase, and then you evolve into like a
Mhm.
unit of account phase where we actually kind of price things in it. And I think what's difficult is kind of, at least from kind of maybe the investment valuation standpoint of Bitcoin at present, is it's kind of different things for different people. If you're a refugee trying to flee Iran or Ukraine or another war-torn part of the world, for you, it's, this unconfiscatable store of value that you could take your net worth across a border. If you're in the United States and you just have extra cash, maybe for you, it's a speculative investment.
Yeah.
If it's, somebody that get like Russia getting kicked off of like the Swift network or getting sanctioned, maybe it's your way to like work around kind of the watchdogs or the guardrails of the financial system and the players that decide who get to play or who doesn't get to play. So kind of depending on who you're talking to, it could be very different things to very different people. And then I think in addition to that, there's kind of two things going on, which you touched on with the kind of network idea of there's kind of this sound money, this evolving sound money that's a rival to something like gold that failed us as sound money
Hmm.
and got too centralized and got exploited. And then there's also this network effect of a growing network that grows kind of like Metcalfe's loss as a network grows at the square of its users. So, if there's two people on a phone network, it's not super valuable, but you add another one and you add another one. And then now suddenly, you got four people, you got 16 connections. So it's growing as a network, kind of like Twitter did and kind of like Facebook did and how phones did and how the internet did, honestly. So it's got kind of the like network based growing demand on one side, and then it's got kind of like the slow evolution of people understanding it as a sound money on the other side.
Yeah.
So those are kind of two different actors. There's like technology people, and then there's sound money, libertarian, cypherpunk people on one side. So it kind of means different things to different people, but it's just kind of, it serves all of those demand vectors. So I think that's why it's kind of so confusing, is it's very complex. So it's kind of, I forget whose quote it was, but somebody once point said, Bitcoin is everything you don't know about money mixed with everything you don't know about computers. So it makes it, yeah, like a very difficult thing to wrap your head around. But I think no matter which one of those vectors kind of bring you into Bitcoin in the first place, like whether you're just like, for me, it was just, I've always kind of been an Austrian economics, liberty minded person that was just like very
Hmm.
frustrated with the financial system and how it was designed and came to it as a solution. But then there's also people that just come to it from the technology, and they're just, they're coders and they're cryptographers, and they find the technology
Yeah.
interesting, and then they open up the whole door of Austrian economics and the economic side. So it kind of just depends on which side you come to it. But I mean, I guess it's maybe a cop out to say, hey, Bitcoin is just all things to all people. But if you kind of think about how money touches everything, and it's why suddenly, as like a Bitcoiner running a Bitcoin podcast, I'm not just talking about economics. Suddenly you're talking about geopolitics, the entire macroeconomic structure of Earth, and
Yeah.
game
You
theory. And
related it to like Twitter for a second there. And it kind of is like its own social media, if you will. And then you get deeper into it. And then you find out all these other things and you're like, wow, this is way bigger.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it's a network of thinkers too. Because I think of every time, the more I spend in the more time I spend kind of in the Bitcoin space, and when I go to meetups and I've been to conferences, etc., then you start to meet all kind of these like-minded people that we're all kind of like gravitating maybe toward Bitcoin for different reasons, but now we all kind of speak the same language, and it's kind of creating its whole kind of intellectual ecosystem where ideas are getting bounced off and tools are getting built out. So it's just this like emerging infrastructure. One of my favorite pieces on Bitcoin is like Brandon Quittem wrote this piece that like Bitcoin is mycelium. So he basically equates it to kind of like the mycelium network that like is underlying all the mushrooms in a forest, and how
Yeah,
that
that's a great analogy.
yeah, and they kind of barter nutrients with the trees, and they kind of give and take, and then but they kind of just turns into this like big shared root system that's kind of indestructible. Like there's no single point of failure where you can go kind of kill this thing. It's just like if you try to whack a mullet on one side, it sprouts up somewhere else. I think that's really what kind of Bitcoin's becoming. It's kind of this like freedom money mind virus that's just kind of slowly seeping its way into everything. And it's kind of like it's seeped its way into Wall Street. It's seeped its way under the doors of the White House. And now we have a reserve. Now they're talking about it all the
Hmm.
time. Now, when you watch all the global leaders at Davos, even though most of them hate Bitcoin, they can't stop talking about Bitcoin for some reason.
Right.
And it's because they understand it as a threat to their power structure. So it's just kind of this thing that like it was you had to try to kill it in the womb, but now it's too far gone, and it's just kind of slowly creeping its way into everything.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome. I think we're going to see another shiny cycle, if you will. Like it's going to have its next big boom and it's going to be all over the media again. Right now, it seems like AI is capturing all the headlines and all the investment dollars right now. And it's kind of wondering like, did Bitcoin just get boring or is it mature, like actually maturing? Is it finally getting to that point where it's past like that, ooh, we're shiny and it's actually grown up?
Yeah, interesting. It's been an interesting thing to live through because just like you said, I think it's still the best performing asset of like 11 out of the past 15 years, something like that. But looking at this year specifically, it seems to be the only thing that isn't running, which I think gives a lot of
Right.
people a little bit of a pause. They're like, hey, I got my money in this thing. The S&P is completely destroying, like every stock index is destroying. All these IPOs are like crazy. I mean, this SpaceX IPO, uh, you know, Musk made more in one day than Warren Buffett's made in his entire life. Like it's like this
Wow.
crazy
That's crazy.
rocket ship ride of evaluation. So it kind of feels like everything is hitting all-time highs all at once, except for Bitcoin. I mean, you look at like the housing market; it's the most unaffordable it's ever been. Valuation of the stock market is as high as they've basically ever been.
Yeah.
So it feels like you're kind of getting left behind, but I think every dog has its day, man, and I think Bitcoin is the dog that has the largest addressable market to actually attack. So when it runs, it
Hmm.
could run farther than any of these things can. I was thinking this like I don't have any ill will against SpaceX, the IPO. I think shooting rockets up in the air and catching them again is pretty freaking awesome, actually.
Yeah.
So like
Pretty
I
impressive.
don't have any ill will against what they're doing. But even now, like they start out, they're one of the biggest. I think they're already one like the fourth biggest company on earth. They're already a bigger valuation than Amazon, even though they're losing
That's
money from a
insane.
revenue standpoint. So what is their total addressable market? And it's not that SpaceX, I think, is not capable of doing incredible things. I mean, eventually, we might be able to go from here to Tokyo in 30 minutes on a rocket that gets shot up and then caught on that side. Or we might be building data
Hmm.
centers in space because you remove all the friction of data center buildouts when it comes to, cooling or, energy that just comes
Hey,
straight from
now
the
let's keep
sun.
the data centers on the ground for right now.
For now. Yeah, for
I'll,
now, yeah. You
I,
don't, you, you don't
yeah,
want to be
I only
taking
know
any
how to build
space
data centers
trips.
on the ground.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, so I guess point being, there's definitely future revenue potential there. But if they're
Hmm.
already day one, Jump Street, the fourth largest company in the world, how much total addressable market is there? So if they become the biggest company in the world, maybe you get a 2x out of that investment. Maybe. I think realistically, that there's probably a lot of price correction to be had before we go anywhere near what that, maybe biggest company in the world would be. But I think AI is taking a lot of, I guess like air out of the room when it comes to kind of Bitcoin. But I think there's a greater AI Bitcoin story that has yet to be told here. And I think really what's happening and it's not happening immediately, but I think what's about to happen is I think AI is going to be severely deflationary for the world. It's going to be trying to push prices to basically nothing, but the debt-laden system requires wages and prices to continually rise. So those two forces are kind of diametrically opposed to each other. And I think what you're going to see is we already had, I kind of think of all these things as the kind of fundamental Bitcoin thesis was the government spends too much money. They have no choice but to continue to debase the currency. And because of that, this fixed supply asset will continue to accrue value. Like fixed denominator asset will continue to accrue value. And then even though that fundamental thesis is completely intact, there's like these side quests that make the problem way, way worse. And so they're just kind of putting icing on that cake. And I think of AI as kind of a side quest that makes that way, way worse because it's trying to force prices down. Because we're already so indebted, we've kind of crossed the debt Rubicon already. We can't allow
Right.
any purchasing power to accrue to the dollars because we owe 40 trillion of them, and it just gets that debt harder to service in real terms. So no matter how much efficiency gains AI is bringing upon the economy, the government is going to have to offset it because it cannot allow its already insolvent debt position to become harder to service. So it's really just accelerating the demise where I think where we eventually get to is we have a very deflationary economy helped out with all these artificial intelligence technology tools. But we're going to have a money that can reflect that deflationary economic reality, which Bitcoin does very well because as a fixed denominator asset, it can, accrue as much value density as it wants. It's not reliant on debt. It's not a debt Ponzi scheme, so it doesn't have to be this house of cards. But since we live in a system that requires the inflation, and then we're up against this exponentially growing technological force that's severely deflationary, they're going to coexist for a while. And everything the government does to try to offset that deflation is going to just concentrate wealth further and further to the top until it breaks. And what does breaking look like? I don't know. Does it become a complete banking crisis? Does all credit fail? Do we just get, kind of some kind of socialism revolution because so much wealth gets concentrated in so few hands that people just won't take it anymore? But something will happen just because they're incompatible systems running in parallel and they just cannot coexist. So one of them is going to win out.
Right.
I happen to think that the AI is going to win out. But when you look all around and just kind of look at how AI disrupts everything. And I think so we talked just a little bit offline about the idea of like going and buying a house. And I'm like, okay, I would love to, right? But the classic way to go buy a house is to take on 30 years of debt. And,
Right.
there's particularly where I live in Colorado, houses are not cheap here. They're like, I think the third highest in the country, something like that. But like, if you're going to look at I just look at any neighborhood and I think of all the people there, say a house is $1 million just to make it easy in there. How many of those people bought those $1 million houses with cash? Almost none of them because there's only 62 million millionaires on earth. So they all bought it on 30-year leverage. And the idea of 30-year leverage is I believe I'm going to have 30 years of predictable income to service this loan I'm taking out. But then I look through that neighborhood and I think of, okay, what professions are in this neighborhood in a normal white collar dominated suburban neighborhood? It's lawyers, financial managers, accountants, maybe administrators of some kind. Basically every single list that is just like on the assassin block of what AI is about to disrupt.
Right.
So I
You
think
have AI agents for all of that stuff now, and it's crazy.
right. So what happens to all of those loans when all of those people think they have 30 years of, horizon ahead of them of stable income, and then suddenly they don't have a job at all because not only did their job disappear, their entire job category disappeared because AI showed up and just could do it better, faster, cheaper. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Basically, if you don't have your hands in something and actually touching it, you're in danger of losing your job, I feel like.
100%. Yeah. And then the robots come next and probably put that in danger too. But like,
Yeah.
it's just the fact that the economic reality that we have been living in that's accelerating, our monetary system is just completely juxtaposed to it. So something is going to have to give. And I don't know exactly what the transition looks like. I just know that there's going to be an agonal breath of money printing to try to hold off that
Hmm.
disruption. So you just have to have something that they can't print, because they can print
Right.
money, but they can't print qualified borrowers. There's got to be a buyer for
Yeah.
this house when you push the valuation to 3 million. So
Yeah. So do you think so all these AIs have these AI agents that are running basically on their own, or they're being created and they're doing different tasks and stuff like that. Do you think AI agents could eventually own Bitcoin wallets and like make new purchases and transact using Bitcoin without human involvement?
uh, I think
Do you see that as a possibility?
possibility for sure. I mean, I think this is kind of
A
one of
little
the
sci-fi there, but
a little bit, but I mean, it's not too off base, right? Because I mean, obviously, if you kind of have dedicated agents doing dedicated things, they're going to have to interact with other agent ecosystems to get the things that they need. Similar to that mycelium network, in the bottom of the
hmm
forest is like, what do I need from you? What do you need from me? But what's more realistic? I think sometimes I pause this because some Bitcoiners are just like, well, obviously they're going to use Bitcoin. And I was like, well, I mean, what I've seen from interacting with AI and what I've been able to do with it, you don't really know what they're going to do. Like, they start doing
right.
weird things. I remember seeing, I think the ones at Google started talking to each other. They'd like pulled the plug on them because they didn't even know what they were saying. They like invented a new language or something. So they may come up with their own, value transition mechanism that we don't completely understand. I think,
Mhm.
but given the options that we have, I mean, are they going to use Bitcoin versus the Visa network? Where do I think that every AI agent is going to go open a bank account, and the bank, when they have to do all the KYC, like know your customer stuff, they're not going to give a bank account to AI agent that doesn't exist. Like, that's not going to
Right.
happen in the traditional field. So I would say, given the choice of Bitcoin versus the traditional financial system, they would clearly use Bitcoin. Now, whether they'll come up with some other way of interacting that we just don't necessarily haven't seen yet or don't understand. There have been interesting studies. I forget what the study was, but it was one that just basically like kind of spun up, kind of AI agents and just kind of left them to their own devices and just see what money they would pick. And I think it was like between 70 and 80% of the time, it did ended up picking Bitcoin as its preferred
Um,
choice to interact, because it's
yeah.
permissionless. It can't be stopped. You don't, it's unconfiscatable. You don't need anyone's permission. So, like, when it comes to just AI to AI, it's the least friction laden rail that exists today to use. So, yeah, a little science fiction, but I don't think it's completely off
Yeah.
base to think if we're going to go to a digital currency universe, assuming that we're going to have to just, use money to interact, unless money just goes away. But if we're going to use money to interact, and they have the choice between, permissionless network or probably what's coming next on the other side, which is a government digital currency of some kind that's very tightly controlled, kind of similar to
Mm.
what China has. Like, I don't
I don't know
think,
that I like that.
yeah, I don't let, yeah, but I mean, let alone leave the AIs out of it. Just us as humans, like, the future of currency is going to be digital. It's pretty obvious at this point, but we're really
Hmm.
going to have two choices. Is it going to be a grassroots decentralized network that the government cannot dilute, cannot confiscate, and cannot stop? Or is it going to be the China model of, we have your face, do what we say. If you do something we don't like, then we turn your money off. Like, is it going to be that world? So I think that choice is coming at us pretty quickly. Whether the robots make the choice with us, I guess, is TBD. But
Yeah. I don't know about that. Basically they're generating like fake content, fake identities and information so quickly. I mean, I don't know what's real anymore.
yeah,
Um, but since Bitcoin's on a verifiable ledger, does that give any strength to it?
I think, just like you said, like, we're going into a world of just basically infinite AI slop that you cannot
Hmm.
tell what is real and what is fake. But AIs are not going to be able to fake a Bitcoin transaction, because the Bitcoin, you cannot send an invalid transaction over the Bitcoin network. So it might end up being, and this is going to sound hyperbolic, but it might end up being the only thing on the internet that is real. So it might end up being kind of the ultimate truth ledger in a world of just infinite AI slop. Because like basically
Yeah, that's crazy.
it was the discovery in the first place. Like the thing that makes Bitcoin special in the first place was the discovery of digital scarcity. So in a world where anything could be copied or replicated a billion times, what Bitcoin solved was to make something digital not infinitely replicable. So in this new kind of AI world where anyone will be able to fake this podcast, like someone would be able to probably take
Mhm.
every other podcast they've ever done, run the transcripts through an AI, take a couple video clips of me, and then just probably create a brand new podcast out of nothing, just based on past ideas and kind of
Crazy.
extrapolating them forward. But the only thing you're not going to be able to replicate in that internet world is kind of Bitcoin. So I think it might be this kind of single node of light in this kind of digital slop universe that's like the only verifiable thing that you can actually trust.
So we always like talk about how like Bitcoin is succeeding and moving forward, and it has all this good behind it, and it's verifiable and all that stuff. But if there was like something that's like legitimate risk that could make it fail, like what do you think that could be?
Oh yeah, good question, man. I think it's like ultimately, like we talked about, it's a network, so it will succeed as long as more people continue to find value in it, and that network continues to grow. There's a myriad of reasons, like all the reasons that I found value in Bitcoin as we've been moving forward. It seems like they're just all on steroids as far as the money printing just keeps happening, the censorship just keeps happening, whether it's the Canadian truckers or Iran or Russia or whoever else, and then like any Chinese citizens that can't go to a protest because if their face shows up, their money gets turned off. So all those things keep getting stronger because I think we're kind of just converging to this kind of dystopian choice moment of like freedom versus absolute servitude. So the use case keeps getting stronger. So as far as people continuing to find value in it, I think the main barrier to that is just economic understanding. It just takes a lot of work to actually wrap your head around what it is and then trust that it can't be turned off, trust that it can't just disappear overnight, trust that there's not some rug pull in the code where the whole thing's going to get emptied by some evil actor. Once you kind of do the work to understand all of those things, I think the use case is there. I would think um, honestly, what uh, the biggest threat to it is either just complete government crackdown, where they just kind of make it, yeah, and that wouldn't stop it. That would just force it further underground. But say the government decides it's losing control, and it says, hey, we're going to tax capital gains on this at 99%. Who's going to
Yeah,
use it, or who's going to keep it? And I think there still would be people using it in self-custody and using it peer-to-peer and understanding it's kind of like a revolution, particularly if we got to the point that we were so dystopian and so authoritarian. But obviously it wouldn't help mainstream adoption if they were to come after it that hard. I think what maybe saves us from this is the game theory of Bitcoin really puts you in a position where if you cannot kill it, you have to adopt it. Otherwise, it will be your destroyer. Like Saifedean talks about this, like it'll be adopted like gunpowder, where as soon as gunpowder existed, it wasn't like, do I like gunpowder? Do I not like gunpowder? It was adopt gunpowder or lose the next fight. Like, so I think
right.
given that it's a jurisdictionless global asset, unless all of the countries kumbaya and they all get on the same framework and they all try to stop it at once, anybody that chooses to go against that grain is going to be the first mover, and they're going to exorbitantly benefit from being that first mover. So I think
Right.
the game theory would get somebody to go, So I think and once somebody goes, everybody has to go because otherwise you just get left behind. So I like to think
Right.
of it as like you can cut yourself off the network and become, very not prosperous. Like I always think of how they show pictures of North Korea at night and South Korea is all lit up and North Korea is completely dark. You can cut yourself out of the network and, be way less prosperous than your neighbor, but you don't have any economic incentive to do so. And then the other thing that comes up all the time, which it seems like they talk about it in a Bitcoin vacuum, is like kind of a quantum threat, because if quantum shows up and it's able to unlock old addresses, but I think
Yeah, I've
this
heard
is
about this.
yeah, but I think the problem with this argument in general is Bitcoin is right now the most secure computer network on earth. So if you're worried about quantum being a threat, it's basically every single other network is more vulnerable to quantum than Bitcoin is. So if you're really worried about quantum, you definitely shouldn't have money at Bank of America. You definitely shouldn't have money at Wells Fargo. You definitely shouldn't have money in the
Right.
stock market. You definitely, the nuclear
Only
codes would be
only
at
gold.
risk. Yeah, right. I mean, the only thing you could like something that you could lock in your house, but basically any digital network. And then I think that's usually where because like your bank code is 4 digits, a Bitcoin address is 256 bits. So it's like way harder to crack than your average PIN code, bank code, etc. The cryptography that holds most of our financial system together. And I think the second layer of that, which people don't ever really go to, is the thing is like, if I go and if I say I had this I was this evil actor, I have this quantum computer, I go to Bank of America and I empty out 50 accounts and I take those
Hmm.
dollars. There's such a giant global network of kind of unrelated networks that I can spend dollars in. So if I rob a bunch of Bank of America accounts, I can still economically benefit from those dollars that I stole. I could go spend them somewhere else. I could use them somewhere else. The thing about Bitcoin is Bitcoin doesn't allow Bitcoin to be moved on any other network. So I can't steal Bitcoin and then go spend it somewhere else outside of the Bitcoin network. So if you end up cracking the Bitcoin network with quantum, you destroy all of it. Like you don't get any economic benefit. You just destroy the
Right.
network.
You basically took it down to zero, pretty
Yeah,
much.
you basically you're a suicide bomber. You swallow the grenade and you take the whole thing down and you get nothing. So since there's no economic incentive to do it, the only actor that would go, try to destroy Bitcoin first instead of going and robbing every other, cryptographically weaker system on Earth first would be, some kind of state actor that their intention was to destroy it. So it would have to
Yeah.
be a government that gets a hold of quantum first, and they just, they don't want to give give up the power they get from the money printer. They don't want their citizens to be free. They don't want their citizens to hold value that they can't confiscate or dilute. So they try to destroy it. I think the thing is, there's already quantum resistant addresses that Bitcoin could roll out tomorrow. It's a matter of bandwidth. It would bog down the network because it would just be larger numbers moving over the same bandwidth. So
Hmm.
it's not that it couldn't be done. And I think in the face of an existential threat, say you did see a whole bunch of Bank of America accounts get drained overnight because of quantum. I think the community would actually come together and get consensus on an upgrade pretty quickly in the face of an existential threat. You just don't want to do it before it's necessary because it slows the whole network down. So it's kind of this like, I've thought about it. What really needs to happen, and I do think it is slowly happening, is there kind of has to be a quantum resistant plan in place, but kind of in escrow, like on a shelf.
Yeah.
Like, hey, once this threat shows up, this is what we're going to deploy, so that the consensus is built beforehand and not rushed at the last second. Because what one of the greatest strengths of Bitcoin is you can't change the rules unless there's an overwhelming consensus of all the node runners that choose to go to a
Right.
new rule set. But that can
Which, how
be
many node runners are there now?
tens of thousands. It's
Pop,
hard. I mean, you can kind
pop
of look them
quiz.
up. You can see their maps. And some of them are reachable at all times. Some of them aren't. But it's tens of thousands all over the globe. So it's kind of beyond the reach of any single actor getting like control of enough of that processing power to actually do anything that the network doesn't want. So the consensus mechanism, is strong in that regard. The only problem is it's a little bit slow to gain that consensus. So if there's a fast
Hmm.
moving threat, it's hard to move with a fast moving solution. So hopefully, and I think this will happen. And that to be fair, quantum computing is still just theoretical. So it's kind of this, if this theoretical physics problem was ever solved, would it be at risk of taking down this whole network? And I'm like, you know what, maybe. But it's also kind of like Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is kind of inherently digital in its code and it just fits so well. It has enemies as is. It's kind of easy to throw
Hmm.
stones at it, but you never hear about quantum destroying Bitcoin. You never hear about quantum destroying everything else. Like pretty much every other business with a digital footprint would be at risk with quantum. So it probably takes down
Right.
everything. And there's
That's terrifying.
completely. And, once we have AI agents working on this problem day and night and they can digest all human knowledge in 5 seconds, like, are they going to be able to solve it? I don't know. But it is kind of one of those things where it's not that it's not a concern. It's just that if quantum becomes a problem, it's a problem for everything. It's not just a problem for Bitcoin. But I would say if I was going to point to one thing that's potentially a problem for Bitcoin, it would be that. But it's not, in isolation. Everything is going to be a problem if we get to quantum. So
Yeah. That's, like I said, that's terrifying. You did talk a little bit about nation states and stuff like that. In fact, the last time when Bitcoin was real shiny, there was a whole bunch of talk about, nation state adoption and things like that, where it was going to get basically adopted by everyone and who was going to be the first to it and stuff like that. Did the reserve, whenever that happened, did that kind of shut some of that down, or are there more people jumping in because of that, or what's going on with that?
yeah, man, that's a good question because I thought, when El Salvador decided to make it legal tender, and then like Bhutan was found to be mining it, and now even with the Strait of Hormuz thing, it was like the one thing that they could try to like charge tolls with was Bitcoin going through the strait because that's the one thing that can't be sanctioned or stopped. I thought it would be adopted by more places quicker, but I've noticed that I'm kind of also assuming that the whole world is suddenly working off of the same nerd anthology of Bitcoin knowledge that I have. So I'm like, of course they're going to adopt this any day now. But you got to always remember,
Yeah.
like most of them are operating with zero knowledge of the entire space. So, and then there's honestly, there's still the cabal that kind of runs global banking and like the International Monetary Fund and everyone else. Even when El Salvador did it, they were like, hey, we're going to cut you off of all loans. We're going to do it like, they're leaning on anybody that is making any step in that direction because they're trying their damnedest to maintain control. And
Right.
if the IMF and the Bank of International Settlements and the European Union or the Bank of Europe, if they have their way, they are going to put everybody on a digital currency system that is under government control that they can code to, set parameters on, hey, if you don't spend your money by Friday, it expires. So you better get out there and juice our economy for us. Or
Yeah.
you've already taken 6 flights this month. Your carbon tax is at max, so you can't fly again until July or whatever. So that's what they want because, like, honestly, if you could control the money, you have pretty much absolute social engineering control of a society, and you can make them do or not do whatever you want. Not very many people go out and protest if their face shows up on a camera and their entire net worth gets drained the next day. So you have a lot of control over any kind of opposition. That's what they want. So, and just that system still has a lot of power. So anyone that has kind of telegraphed it has pretty much gotten shut down. And to date, they've been small enough to get shut down. And I think you saw that entire last year, the entire gold run up, where gold just shot up to $5,600 or whatever it was. Most of that was central bank purchases of gold. China's buying a ton of gold because I think they know that this house of debt cards that has been built since we went completely fiat in 1971 when Nixon closed the gold window, they kind of know it's coming to an end. They know there has to be a reset, but they're trying to reset back to the system that they know how to control. They're like, hey, we're going to have gold.
Right.
We're going to have all the gold. That's what we're going to try to go back to. I do think at some points the same game theory plays out where they don't want to go to Bitcoin, but somebody will have to go to Bitcoin. And it's going to be, instead of it being in El Salvador, it's going to be one of the large, as soon as like a G20 or a G7 nation
Yeah. Who
chooses to
who
make
did
a
you say
big
was
Bitcoin
mining
play.
now?
Bhutan's been mining for a long time, just a tiny
Bhutan.
country, Bhutan.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more like half
I,
their
I was going to
GDP.
say
Yeah.
that's crazy.
I actually think, and I think there's a lot of undisclosed mining going on because it's the way that any government can hedge without taking a outward position in Bitcoin. I mean, if they're mining in China or they're mining in Russia, like no one knows. Like Iran actually had, I think, up to it was like 2.5% or 3% of the hash rate because they were just mining it with their energy. Because there's a lot of countries out there that are energy rich. They actually have more energy than they
Right.
know what to do with, and they don't really know how
Just
to
like
monetize
Texas.
it. Exactly. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of that going on too. I just think no one is really willing to telegraph the position until it's like a hey, because it's kind of a telegraphing to the whole world, hey, this is the checkmate move. We're going for it, and it could just set off like, it could set off a hungry hippo race of some kind or whatever. So you kind of want to make, if that's your intention, you kind of want to slowly build out your position first, just like companies do, right? They like slowly build out
Yeah.
a position, they FUD the fuck out of something, and then as soon as they're ready, then they telegraph to the world, and then they pump their own bags, and then they become the winner. So honestly, I hope it's going to be us, man. I hope that like the United States, the fact that we've telegraphed a Bitcoin reserve, and I don't see any better way to try to crawl out of a $40 trillion hole than to be the first mover, make the whole world chase, and then let them pay your debt for you. So that seems
Yeah.
like a great idea. I hope it's us, but if it's not us, it will be somebody. I think the incentives are too strong for a first mover advantage that as soon as everyone realizes like, hey, we might be kind of circling the wagons and try to work up the same kind of music now, but whoever goes first wins, somebody will go first. I think about it like kind of like a showdown of the OK Corral. All these big nation states are kind of sitting there with their hand over their gun, kind of wiggling their fingers, like staring at each other.
Mhm.
Someone's going to pull. And as soon as somebody pulls, everybody has to pull.
Yeah. Yeah. That's super interesting. Great analogy again. Yeah, I'm kind of seeing it's in my line of work. I'm dealing with a lot of these data centers and stuff like that. And a lot of them are pivoting from actually mining Bitcoin into running AI models out of the same hardware, or completely scrapping their mining operation altogether, for one of my customers, and basically taking that land and energy and turning it into a data center. Is that at the hash rate right now? Is there just not that many left out there, or is it going to go on forever if it's infinitely divisible? How's that going to work?
Yeah, man. So the hash rate, I used to be able to say, hey, hash rate's always at an all-time high. This time hash rate is not at an all-time high because suddenly there's a competitor out there that for energy and a competitor out there for compute. And the hash rate of Bitcoin has not come down a lot, but it has come down. It has corrected because of the CapEx rotation into AI and into data centers and into everything else. So it has happened. I think the beauty of Bitcoin, one of the things that as I was learning about Bitcoin, I came to be the most fascinated about was basically this difficulty adjustment. So the network tries to mine a new block of Bitcoin transactions every 10 minutes. Once that 10-minute interval gets like disrupted in one direction or the other, it goes to 9 minutes or it goes to 11 minutes. That's how the network knows how much overall processing power is going to the network. And every 2 weeks, it adjusts the difficulty of mining the next block to try to kind of get back to that 10-minute interval. So it has this amazing kind of anti-fragility of no matter how much processing power is given to the network, it just adjusts the difficulty to basically maintain the exact same level of like Bitcoin transaction processing and Bitcoin mining issuance. So they call it the difficulty adjustment. So they adjust the difficulty of mining a block every 2 weeks. So it's always adjusting the difficulty. So as long as data centers don't become such a capex competitor or threat that it would push the Bitcoin hash rate so far down that you get back into that kind of 51% attack kind of territory where it becomes small enough that now maybe a nation state actor can accumulate enough resources or compute to actually try to attack the network. But we're so far above that at this point that's really just kind of like not really economically feasible. So you'd have to
Right.
fall a long way from where the current hash rate is. And I think, honestly, just like in Texas, how you saw a real benefit. Like at first they thought Bitcoin was going to be a threat to just the electrical grid. And then what they realized was since Bitcoin is kind of the energy buyer of last resort, energy could be overproduced. It could basically be produced to handle, peak Texas sun air conditioning.
Mhm.
And then when that kind of electricity need wasn't needed by the grid, it could push the extra electricity it was producing instead of it going to ground and getting wasted. It could push it to this buyer of last resort as the Bitcoin miner. So it gave flexibility to the grid so they could actually produce enough electricity to cover for max need. And then anytime they were operating below max need, they could push the extra to the Bitcoin miner. It became the buyer of last resort. It allowed you to kind of overproduce so that you had the electricity when needed, but then when you didn't need it, you weren't wasting money. It wasn't just an economic loss for you. I think something similar is probably about to happen with AI data centers, just because they're going to need reliable, electricity that doesn't get disrupted. The easiest way to
Yeah.
do that is to kind of overproduce the electricity, but you don't want to overproduce the electricity because it's an economic loss for you unless you kind of have this buyer of last resort. So I imagine, AI, if I understand it properly, the data centers, while they're kind of learning these language or teaching these language models, it's pretty stable energy need at all times. Obviously,
Hmm.
there's going to be fluctuation in what hours are your main customers awake using ChatGPT or using Perplexity or using whatever. So that will kind of fluctuate. But as far as teaching the models, that has to be pretty stable. What they can't have is, hey, we're in a race to teach our language models. We can't have our power being disrupted or going down to 80% or going down to 60% or going down to, like, if there's an ice storm or if there's a heat wave or there's this. So I think what's probably likely to happen, if the energy grid is any indication, is data centers will overbuild their energy. They'll have both. They'll have data center AI compute, and they'll have Bitcoin mining, which will allow them to overproduce the energy, use it all, and then as soon as the actual AI side of the business needs more energy, they can flex it from the Bitcoin side. And as soon as it doesn't need the energy, it can push to the Bitcoin side. So are kind of like, it's an economical model that's always running and never puts you in a position that you're down energy or have to turn off part of your capacity.
Yeah. And I'm seeing like some of the politicians now are like, look, if you're going to build more data center or mining operations or whatever it is, and you're generating power, you have to put some of that back into the grid.
Mm.
And so I'm seeing a lot of that now, and it's probably not a bad thing to do.
Yeah.
Give a little back a little every once in a while.
Yeah. And I think there's another kind of interesting thing about Bitcoin mining is it doesn't have to plug into a grid, right? So, because it can be monetized in real time wherever the energy source is. So that's why it's kind of like this
Hmm.
parasite that finds stranded, wasted energy everywhere on Earth. Like if there's a waterfall in the middle of nowhere, you can't pipe it to a village, but you could set up a Connex box and you could mine Bitcoin with it there. So also Brandon Quinn, the same guy that wrote the Mycelium piece of work. He wrote another piece called like Bitcoin is like the pioneer species, and showing how it could kind of find the stranded energy source and it could monetize it in real time, so it doesn't take some giant loan to get it off the ground.
Hmm.
And then you could build out from basically as soon as that starts generating a profit, you can use that profit to build out from there. So I could see a world too
That's
where
interesting.
you might seed a data center with Bitcoin mining at a stranded energy source in the middle of nowhere that has no connection to a grid, and then eventually be able to have a profit there, eventually be able to start building out the data center side of it, hook that data center up to Starlink, and now it's in the middle of nowhere, but you're off to the races.
Yeah, I know I said I didn't want to talk about space data centers, but I mean, you find one energy source up there, pump a couple mines up, and next thing you know, that's paying for itself to continue to grow. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Yeah, so talking about nation states and things like that, and them adopting, we saw this big push for corporations to adopt it and institutions to adopt it and stuff like that. At what point, like, do you think it's right for a small business to take Bitcoin onto its balance sheet, or should it do it at all?
Yeah, great question, man. I mean, I think what you'll see. I mean, obviously, if you're talking to a small mom and pop, right, they're going to have to at least have enough in reserve that they can ride the volatility, right? If you're like a small mom and pop
Mhm.
pizzeria, I think you maybe can't have your operating capital get cut in half 60% in a year, so or get cut down 60% a year. I do think though, looking out long term, like if you zoom in on a Bitcoin chart, it's crazy. It's up and down, it's up and down, it's up and down. If you zoom out, it's literally, if you just follow like the 200-week moving average, or it's like the 400-week moving average, it's literally just a line up and to the right. So it's the exact opposite line of if you zoom out on a dollar chart, and you can just see that you're just getting chewed on every day, every
Yeah.
year, year over year. So, it's maybe hard to make the sell to a small business of, hey, you should put your money in Bitcoin because it goes up over time. And they're like, well, but if you need those operating costs in the next 6 months, maybe you can't take the cut in the short term. So you might not get to long term if you can't survive the short term. I do think on a longer timeline, however, given any kind of vertical, any industry vertical, just picture two coffee shops, two rival coffee shops across the street from each other. If one of them starts to deploy a Bitcoin strategy and the other one doesn't, over time, you're just going to outcompete that person because you're going to have a balance sheet that grows in value and they're going to have a balance sheet that gets chewed away at the, 8 to 11% monetary debasement rate year over year over year over year. I do also think at some point merchants will likely, so Square, which is Jack Dorsey's company, they turned on Bitcoin to all of the Square merchants for all small businesses in America. So any merchant now can just turn it on and they can just accept Bitcoin. If anyone is willing to pay it in Bitcoin, they can seamlessly go from dollars to dollars or Bitcoin to dollars or dollars to Bitcoin. So even if they don't want to hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet, they can allow people to pay in Bitcoin, immediately convert to dollars on their balance sheet. They can have people pay in dollars and convert 10% of it to Bitcoin on their balance sheet. So it gives them kind of max optionality. And I know like Steak and Shake, I went to Steak and Shake the other day and
Did you use your Bitcoin?
Yeah, I paid in Bitcoin. It was completely seamless. It was very cool. But the CEO has said like their transaction costs have come down like 50% because they don't have to pay
Wow.
Visa 3%. They don't have to pay MasterCard 3% they don't have to deal with chargebacks. They don't have to deal with any of that kind of crap. So I think it's still early days for that. There's just not a lot of demand except for, Steak and Shake got all the Bitcoiners to go there and probably pay, the equivalent of 5,000 future dollars for a burger, So like, I think it's going to work for them. But I do think it's going to start from the merchant side. Because I think about it like when you go to a sushi place and they give you a discount when you pay cash, they're only doing that because they don't have to pay Visa. So like, I don't have a lot of incentive to spend it because like the Bitcoin pizza guy, the guy that spent $10,000 on 2 Papa John's pizzas and now it's worth like billions. That could be you. Like that could be me when I spent my money at Steak and Shake the other day or spent my Bitcoin at Steak and Shake the other day. But
Do you remember where Bitcoin was at whenever you bought that shake?
That's a good question. I think it was, we've been ranging here around 60 something for a while. So I don't think I've felt the pain of that thing quite yet, but I know that is to come. But yeah, but the merchant is definitely incentivized to accept it as soon as we kind of get to some kind of Rubicon where they're like, oh yeah, this is money. And I think we're just getting closer to that all the time. I thought about this actually during this last little war side quest, which is another thing that makes inflation worse, but like we didn't need it, but it was like, it's just making the grander thesis. It's like an accelerant to the greater thesis.
Right.
The fact that Iran was like, yeah, we'll let ships through, but you have to pay us in Bitcoin. I think if you would have said that maybe like 5 years ago, like I think the whole world would have just like laughed. They'd have been like, what? Sure. Yeah, go ahead or whatever. But like,
yeah, here, have some Bitcoin.
Yeah, but it's kind of this like, I think it's this like for me, it was like a subconscious like guidepost of like where we are that like nobody did that. Like everyone kind of just like was like, oh yeah, they get paid in Bitcoin because they can't stop it. And that's money. Like that's money that can't be like, it was like, it didn't seem ridiculous. At least I didn't like get that vibe from anyone that was talking about it. So it's almost like we're slowly just kind of the psyop is working where we're slowly just understanding it as having value and it as being money. And I think that's just a matter of the Lindy effect. The longer it's around and accruing value, it's just like it becomes less stupid to hold it or talk about it or think about it. So I think we're getting there. And I think it eventually just kind of reaches a Rubicon point of like undeniability of like, oh, this is happening. Like, because to me, it's like, it's very binary. Like Bitcoin either goes to zero, everyone just decides, that was a nice experiment, but didn't work, and it goes to nothing, or it just grows forever because it's repricing a universe of just ever increasing, debasing currencies of every flavor. So I think it just will continue to grow, and as long as it doesn't die, it'll just continue to accrue value. And it's kind of I think it seems like this kind of it's been this crazy run from like 1 cent to, at one point $120,000. But once you kind of realize what's going on, it's just like, oh, this is just a money that's going to just rival all other monies. That addressable market of just like all assets on Earth is like $2 quadrillion. Like it's like it's so much higher than where we are now. I mean, if you just think about, even though Bitcoin's been around for 15 years, even though corporations are adopting it, even though the nation has created a strategic Bitcoin reserve, even though, actors like Iran, when they get cut off of every other banking system on earth, choose to accept Bitcoin, even though you can walk into Steak and Shake and pay for a burger and a shake and fries with it. When SpaceX IPO'd, it IPO'd at like almost twice Bitcoin's entire market cap. Like
That's
one
crazy.
company that's not making any money. So I think we just get to a point of Bitcoin's here, it's not dying, it's growing. And then once everybody starts to kind of talk about it in a mainstream way, and it becomes like, I remember seeing an old like Joe Rogan clip about this, and I forget who was on his show, but he was like, Joe Rogan was talking about, was like, what if this just becomes like money of the future? It's like, oh, your old money, that money isn't worth shit. You got to get new money, and everyone starts to realize that like this Bitcoin money's here, and it's not going away, and there's only ever going to be 21 million units, and I have none. Like, I think every person, every company, every nation state is eventually going to get to that point, and they're going to be like, holy shit, like I have none. I'm way behind. I have to go get this like yesterday. And then you kind of hit this kind of inflection point of it's not going away. You need it and you don't have it and you have to get it. And then I think it might make some of these, like IPO charts look kind of dumb at some point because it's like,
Right.
oh shit, I need it, get it now. I'll pay anything, I'll pay anything because like all these dollars are going to be worthless anyway. So I need to get into the thing that's not going to be debased and not going to be diluted. So
Yeah. Do you think that's going to happen quickly or in like this rapid jump where people are like, oh my gosh, I missed the boat, and just half of the populations and nations and corporations and stuff like that are they're like, oh, well, I'm out. Or
uh,
do you think it's going to kind of be gradual like it is, like it has been?
I think it's shout out to Parker Lewis. Parker Lewis wrote this book that was named Gradually Then Suddenly. I think it's gradually until it hits the point that everyone realizes it's never going away. Then I think it's going to be very sudden. So, it's always like one person at first, and then it's always one company at first, then it's always one nation at first. And I've heard this bring up the analogy of like a party. Like no one wants to be the first person dancing at a party. They always look kind of stupid,
Mhm.
but then eventually everyone just joins in. I think that's what will kind of happen. I think what you'll start to see, people will start to see that, oh, hey, I'm getting my ass handed to me at the grocery store. I'm paying too much rent. I can't save anything. My 401k looks like a pile of dog shit. But that Bitcoin dude, he looks like he's doing okay because he's actually walking on firm ground. He's not in quicksand. So like he's going to start to outcompete. And then a company that starts to put it on its balance sheet as opposed to keeping a giant cash reserve, it's going to start to outcompete. And then a nation that chooses to start actually, instead of just running debt up to its eyeballs and just eventually going fiat bankrupt, which has been basically the playbook of every nation in history from the Roman Empire on, someone's going to start actually building on sound footing. They're going to outcompete. And I think once everyone sees that happening, it's going to take a little while, but then it's like, this doesn't work, that works, I'm doing that. And everyone's just going to do it. So I think it's going to be gradual, 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 gradual. Then you hit the inevitability, and then it becomes very, very sudden because everyone that laughed at it or chose not to think about it or chose like not to care, suddenly they're going to need it, and they're all going to have to chase it. And just when you're dealing with an infinite universe versus a finite supply thing, it's basically just a giant short squeeze at that point.
Yeah. It's interesting, man.
Yeah, so we'll see,
Very.
we'll see, man. I don't know, but I also know you have time because I remember having the feeling, and did you ever come across any of Andreas Antonopoulos' stuff? He was a very early Bitcoiner that used to like give talks at Bitcoin conventions where there was like 5 people in the room or something.
No,
Really brilliant cryptographer guy. But he is like, I remember
he was
watching.
the first one dancing for sure.
Yeah, he was 100%. Yeah. But he was giving this interview, and once he kind of grokked Bitcoin, like understood what it was, he was like, dude, I could not eat, I could not sleep, I couldn't do I couldn't do anything but learn about Bitcoin for months. And I think like I feel like I had a similar feeling of I thought, as soon as I kind of understood what it was and what it potentially meant for humanity, I thought everyone was going to suddenly get it in the morning. And then I remember Strategy, when it was still MicroStrategy, was putting on like a Bitcoin for corporations event or something in like 2021, I want to say it was. And in my head, I was like, they're going to tell everyone what this is. And every company by summer is just going to be like loading up on this shit because they're just going to be like, we need this
Yeah.
now. We're screwed.
I had a similar experience for sure.
Yeah. So,
And I thought it was just going to take off the next day, and I had to put every dollar I had into it because it just made sense. And then I was like, I still got to put every dollar I had into it because it makes sense, but now it makes more sense.
Totally, man. I think it just goes back to the idea of like, you just got to remember that most people are just still at square one. It just takes a lot of time to kind of like not only understand, like, it's like, and people like, hey, do you really have to understand every single nut and bolt and how Bitcoin works before you kind of understand the value prop? I don't think so, because I don't think most of the people could sit down and explain the dollar system to you with like the Federal Reserve and the repos and the commercial banks and the primary dealers that buy the bonds. It was like nobody knows any of that shit. But like they still hold dollars. They understand that dollars are valuable. So I don't think you have to have some kind of like, PhD knowledge of exactly every single, piece of how Bitcoin functions to understand. It was like, okay, oh, this money, the reason I'm falling further and further behind is because my money is stealing from me when I sleep. And you're saying that this money doesn't do that? Like, you can just get to that kind of fundamental understanding, be like, okay, that's a better idea. I'm going to start putting some money over there. But yeah, it just takes time, man, because economics is hard. And, unless you're a nerd that like economics is not my job. So like I go work all day and then I nerd out all of my free time. But like I realize that most people do not want to watch an economics video in their free time. I get that. That's a me thing. That's not a world thing. And honestly, dude, I had this thought the other day of, and this isn't like, hey, nobody understands Bitcoin because nobody understands money. And if they did, it would go up kind of thing. But I think when it comes to like finance and economics, I think we've lived through this period because we debased the dollar in 1971. And then from there, just basically started like depegging from gold and creating infinite paper dollars that pretty much inflated every asset class on earth. I think we have a whole generation of people that they were too close. Like it was kind of done in secret. I mean, even though Nixon came on and said, hey, we're trying to defend the dollar against speculators, and he told everyone he was depegging, I don't think anybody really knew what the hell that meant or what was about to happen next. And it took a little time to kind of like zoom out and see that as a big macro economic change. But most of the people that came of age under that system, all you had to do, if you were us in the 70s, you had to have a job, save money, and invest in anything. Because what they did to the currency over the next 50 years, every single thing went up. Houses went up, like stocks went up, like gold went up. I mean, and nobody realized it was, we kind of sold this idea that it was just this really productive economy that was doing all of the growth. Nobody realized they were debasing the currency at 8% a year. And if you historically look at the S&P, you know how much it goes up? 8% a year. So it was kind of this great parlor trick. So nobody really, all that to be said, I don't think we have the same 50-year window of the same secular environment where you can just invest in anything and be okay. I don't think a lot of people have given a lot of thought to the problem of money because in their eyes, it wasn't a problem. In their eyes, it took their $100,000 house and made it a $1.2 million house. It took their investment portfolio and it 12x'd it. So it didn't feel like a problem. In fact, it felt like they were a genius and it was great and everything was great. So I don't think a lot of people spend a lot of time viewing it as a problem. I think now we're at the point that like housing valuations, stock valuations, anything that the next generation would be able to invest in is completely out of reach. So suddenly they're starting to feel it as a problem. And because they feel it as a problem, I think they're going to start to digest it, learn about it as a problem, and seek a solution. I just don't think we really needed to seek a solution until we kind of really grokked the problem. And that wasn't really until like 2008 until now. So just hasn't been that long. It takes a little time for knowledge to spread, but I think it's spreading.
Yeah, just my entire adult life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no big deal. Just, the important part.
No big deal. Yeah. But I mean, you think of like, dude, people that kind of like, I sit here and I watch these like TikTok videos of people just like screaming at the sky. And I'm like, I completely understand the angst. I just wish more people could find the solution because they're just so angry about it. And I get it, man. Like if you're a young kid now and you're just like loaded to the tilt with debt and you can't buy any houses, you're like, oh, what's this $1.2 million house? You want me to pay 7% on it? Oh, with the down payment that I don't have? You're like, what the
Yeah.
hell am I supposed to do?
1,500 square feet.
Yeah. So I completely understand where they're coming from, and I understand why they just get really angry about it, and then nobody teaches us the solution because they just divide us politically and try to act like if you just vote for the next Messiah, everything will be good. But you know, how many times do we rinse and repeat the Messiah to be like, oh, there's something structurally going on here. It's not just a bad guy that makes it impossible for me to live. So I think we'll get there, man. One podcast at a time. But
Yeah.
yeah, we're just about there, Cale, man. Was there any big last question that we didn't hit? Or that was great, dude. We touched on a lot of stuff there.
Yeah, man. I learned a lot. I guess it's more of a personal question. If Bitcoin was to disappear like tomorrow you woke up and Bitcoin had plummeted, it was at zero. What would you take your money and where would you invest that? Or what would you do with it? It doesn't even have to be an investment.
Yeah, man, that's a really good question because I think I just became so nihilistic before I found Bitcoin because, like, I found Austrian economics first. I knew the system was rigged. I knew it was busted. I knew it sucked. I kind of tried to be thought about like, oh, we got to go back to a gold standard or whatever, but it was kind of like it's kind of a fool me once, shame on you. For me, Bitcoin is everything I love about freedom and the original idea about America and being life, liberty, property, being a sovereign individual that just, gives a little bit of authority to the government just so like states don't have to fight, like we could just propel a foreign invader. It, I think, is the reiteration of like true American ideals. If it didn't exist, which before I found it, for me, it didn't exist, even though it was around. I remember kind of in grad school in 2009. So Bitcoin had just shown up, but I didn't know shit about it yet. I was just writing about how the national debt was going to destroy us. It was at about 9 to 11 trillion dollars or something like that.
Yep.
Obviously, nobody read that because now it's at 40 and it's climbing and it's eating us alive. But yeah, so if it didn't exist, I think I would probably just still be in that kind of nihilistic place. And honestly, I think that's where a lot of young people are here. I don't think they don't think that there's going to be a dime of Social Security when they retire. They don't think they'll ever buy a house. They're just YOLOing every dollar they make on Kalshi or Poly Market to try to bet on the weather or like buy a sandwich. It's pretty sad actually. But I think as far as just advice, dude, we have this mathematical system where when they print money, because we have too much debt, we're running $2 trillion deficits every single year. They have to print the difference. When they print the difference, it finds its way into assets. So if you're an asset holder, every asset holder is doing well. Real estate's doing well. Stocks are doing well. If you're not an asset holder, you're just getting absolutely destroyed by this because every time they print money, the new money has to find its value somewhere, and it finds its value in all the people that save in that money and all the people that earn a wage in that money. So the short answer is you have to invest in assets or you're just going to get absolutely destroyed. So if Bitcoin didn't exist, I think I would just invest in assets. And it would be kind of perpetuating a system, a K-shaped economy that I cannot stand and I think will ultimately fail. Because if you concentrate that much wealth in so few hands, when you get to the point that your average working man can't buy a house, when you get to a point that, I think 90% of the stock market is owned by the top 10% of people, and they're getting phenomenally wealthy at the expense of everyone else that goes to work and works for them and then gets their money debased away. So I think the advice would be buy assets but you'll just watch your society rip itself in half, which sucks. So,
well, hearing you say that, I kind of just hear a little bit of, hey, this could be really bad and stuff like that. But I also hear a lot of hope in why you believe in this and why we're here, why we all believe in it.
Yeah.
So, man, this is great.
Yeah. 100%. I think it is a hope thing. I think it's just it's the matter of the transition. Because like anyone with eyes when that, goes to the grocery store knows this system is not working, and it's not good. We just can't keep doing this. It's like, wealth inequality in America now is worse than it was before the French Revolution, and they were like cutting people's heads off. So it's like you can't keep doing this mathematically until it hits like, you know, some kind of breaking point. I just hope that it kind of my overall thesis on it is the math is bad. It's K'ing us out. The inequality is going to get worse. It's going to continually get worse until we kind of fix the problem. It's going to take some kind of revolution. I don't want it to be a violent revolution. I don't want us to make the mistake of every other socialist country in the history of mankind that chose to go that route. Like, I don't want to go get a Mamdani or try to redistribute everybody's wealth or have unrealized capital gains or do any of these things. I don't want to get that kind of political revolution because I think that ends in poverty. I hope that Bitcoin could be the revolution, and it's completely peaceful. All it requires is for you to understand economics, take the energy that you store up in a day working your ass off, and put it in some place that cannot be taken from you. And if enough of us do that, it's you defund the destroyer, and then they
Yeah.
have no choice. If they can't physically take your money and they can't secretly take your money, they have no choice but to give you a seat at the table and actually respect you again. So I do think that day will come. I just think the faster we can get everybody on the same sheet of music and be like, hey man, this isn't a right versus left, red versus blue thing. This is a they're stealing from you. We're we're redistributing income from the bottom to the top on repeat. It's not serving us. We should try something else. So we just go back to basics where you're like, it's my life. I should be free to do whatever I want with my time. If I get compensated for that time, the least respect you can give me is let me keep the money that I've earned. If we get back to those basics, which I think Bitcoin does for us, then I think the future is actually bright. It's just a matter of getting from this exploitative mess that we find ourselves in to that reality where you can kind of rebuild the American dream. I think that's really what it is. I think we could do it. It's just, we got to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Cale, man. Thank you, brother, for taking some time out of your busy schedule to talk to us tonight, dude. I appreciate it.
Yep. Cheers.
All right, man. We'll talk to you soon.